Karen Watson, Orlando Salazar, Sanjay Narayan, and Jonathan Booth. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having
Glad to
us.
be here.
Thanks.
So, Karen, let's start with you. Who are your top three choices for Donald Trump's VP and why?
I like Nikki Haley. I think she can bring in a base that is not yet committed to Trump, and that is always good. I like Dr. Ben Carson. I think he can bring an element that can also bring um, voters that are not yet there, and it brings a different kind of attitude to the campaign. And I also like Tim Scott.
And what do you think he brings?
I think he brings an enthusiasm. He's young, he's Black, but I think he can bring an enthusiasm. And I think that is an easy seat to fill in South Carolina, because he would have to vacate that seat to be VP. And then Republicans, I don't think, would lose that seat. So that's also something to consider.
All right, Orlando.
Yeah, I like JD Vance. He's kind of an easy pick, I think, but I think he leaves an opportunity for a successor that I think is very positive. He's still a young guy, so I like JD. Yeah, I like Marco Rubio. I don't know that Marco would fit the bill nationally. I think he's more of a regional candidate, being from South Florida, and I don't know that he still has the big recognition that he had maybe several years ago, maybe the first time he ran. But I would say those are the two picks that I like. I don't know that there's a third.
Okay. Sanjay, who are your top three and why?
So I think there are a couple considerations for the Trump campaign to consider when making this important choice. I think there are really two broad buckets that they could look at. The first is kind of an individual who satisfies the more nationalist populist movement that President Trump has really been at the forefront of moving the conservative and Republican Party more generally. Someone who's in favor of a strong national identity, immigration and border policy, of who's against our involvement in foreign conflicts that don't have a connection to the domestic national interest, and is really in favor of expanding the American middle and working class. So I find myself largely in alignment with those views. So someone like a JD Vance or a Vivek Ramaswamy, someone who can really be an articulate expositor of that particular ideological vision and the policies that President Trump is running on. And then the second bucket would be someone who is perceived as being more temperamentally or dispositionally moderate, who might actually even be more popular outside of the party than within it. So someone like a Nikki Haley or a Tim Scott, who could be more appealing to someone who is a moderate, an independent or a suburbanite, who understands the damage that Joe Biden's policies have inflicted on the country in terms of inflation, higher government spending, reckless immigration policy and increases in illegal immigration, and the fact that we have multiple conflicts around the globe when less than 4 years ago we had world peace. But still is a little bit shy and reluctant to kind of cross the final hurdle and vote for President Trump, and someone who could make that choice more accessible to them. So if I was advising the campaign, I would look at somebody who could swim convincingly in both of those lanes, someone like a Marco Rubio, or a Glenn Youngkin, who's done a phenomenal job as governor in Virginia, someone who can help make the ideological case, be Trump's wingman, but has popularity outside the party as well, because at the end of the day, the goal is to win. So whatever it takes to get to that point.
And Jonathan, your top three and why?
Sure. My top pick right now would be JD Vance. If you look at his biography, he grew up in a part of America, experiencing America, just really struggling like a lot of Americans are now, was able to overcome those things, go to an Ivy League school, served in the military. So he's got a military background. He knows what it takes, or the cost of sending someone to war. And he's fully on board with Donald Trump's agenda. He's also young and would be a great successor in 2028. if the ticket wins here in 2024. So JD Vance would be my top choice. I would say the second and third, probably kind of tied, would be Tim Scott of South Carolina, Senator Scott. Just always a happy warrior, conservative. I think he would complement Donald Trump quite well. And then maybe the third option, similar to what Sanjay mentioned, someone that is maybe a little bit out of Donald Trump's lane, but can appeal to a more moderate voter, Doug Burgum, who dropped out of the presidential race, but the governor from North Dakota, just very hand on the, steady hand on the wheel type, who I think would complement Donald Trump very well.
How important is this pick to Donald Trump? And because in this year, Trump can only serve one term if he is to be reelected. So how crucial is this pick? And especially given the fact that in most past surveys, people say they don't vote for vice president, they vote for president. Do you think that's different this year? Orlando, let's start with you.
It is a little bit different, excuse me, because of that fact. There aren't going to be two terms. I think that's why having somebody younger like JD Vance is important. So yeah, I think it's going to be a bigger factor. I think JD is a conservative choice. I like some of the names that the others have mentioned that are kind of more moderate, but I think JD is a safe choice, and I think he will be supported by the base, and I think he'll make the base come out and support the entire ticket.
Sanjay.
Yeah, I think agreed, Jack, with the caveat that you mentioned that, we are voting for the president. We're not voting for the vice president. But we've seen in recent elections that sometimes the vice presidential choice can hurt the top of the ticket. So the first principle has to be to do no harm. The second is, can they be an addition? Can they add voters somewhere where we might need? Can they expand it? And then finally, the most important principle of all of this has to be, would they be ready? God forbid, in the instance that they have to take power. And we see currently the flaws of having someone who's thoroughly unequipped to do the job. It might actually be one of the reasons why the Democrats felt compelled to re-nominate Joe Biden this time, because they don't feel comfortable with the backup. And so for us, we do have to be mindful of that, given the age of the candidates, but also someone who can be the torchbearer for the ideological movement that Donald Trump has started, and be a steady hand at the wheel if they need to do it, and to help President Trump implement the policies that he's running on. So someone who is capable of doing the job.
Jonathan.
I think the vice presidential pick is going to matter only at the very, very margins. However, this could be an incredibly close election, so it may matter when you look at a candidate maybe who's a little bit more moderate, who can bring back some of the base, or you look at someone like Doug Burgum, who has the significant ability to self-fund, or maybe you're looking at some voters who say, I want someone there who will maybe moderate Donald Trump's impulses somewhat, similar to the last vice president in Trump's first term, Mr. Pence, who I think a lot of people saw as a good balance with Mr. Trump. So I think it could matter at the margins.
And Karen.
Well, I think, in all respect to the other people who are on this is half of the electorate are going to be women. Women are going to be targeted by the abortion issue. And the only option that y'all have mentioned that has been great talking about that issue has been Nikki Haley. And if we don't think that's going to affect this election, we're not looking at this election with our eyes open. This will be an election where they are hammering the abortion issue, and we're going to have a candidate who can handle that argument effectively. And I do believe that Nikki Haley has that, ability to do so. If Biden has a woman on his ticket, even RFK Jr. has a woman on his ticket. It's kind of sad that we as Republicans don't, we show up at these fights, we show up to a gunfight with a knife. And this is going to be a fight unlike any other fight we've had before. And we've got to play to, we got to play the deck that's going to be dealt us, not the one we wish had been dealt us. And Trump is really good with having his base pretty solid. I don't think he needs to get someone to help add to the base. This is not like a McCain campaign where the base is kind of questioning their candidate. The base is pretty solidly behind Donald Trump, no matter what they throw at him. But I think there are that middle pocket where they're going to be attacking based off on so-called women issues. Now, we can all say, well, abortion is not really a woman's issue, but that's how they're going to frame it. And it's going to be a lot easier for a woman to have that conversation than it is for two men to have that conversation.
And let me ask you this as a follow-up, and this is my last question to the panel, but I do want to follow up on Karen's point. And that is, we know that New York State Congresswoman Elise Stefanik has been a woman who's been reported as receiving vetting materials from the Trump campaign. And she's been the only one on that list. And I'm wondering, does Karen have a point here that the former president should consider more strongly, perhaps, a woman to be his vice president? And Jonathan, we'll have you take the stab at that.
I think gender shouldn't be even a very large, even a small factor in what he's looking at as far as his vice presidential pick. I think he needs to look at the others. Are they a competent person who can step in if they need to? Do they bring new voters to the ticket? Are they going to do a good job in a vice presidential debate? All those things probably come before what restroom they use, so to speak. So I think Ms. Stefanik would be a very interesting pick, just because I think those of us who are clued in politically, who pay attention, we know who she is. But I think the vast majority of Americans probably have never heard of her, don't know who she is. So it could be a very interesting pick in that people would be like, "What? Who is this?" They would want to find out more. So it could be a very kind of a wild card pick.
Sanjay.
Yeah, I think nobody wants to play identity politics here, but Karen does make a point that it would be effective. And Nikki Haley did acquit herself well during the primaries. She got a decent percentage, and she did well in the debates, handling herself. She might be at odds with certain points of view with the more traditional Republican voter, but that's part of what having a big tent means. It means bringing in people from different spectrums within the conservative movement to wage a fight that we can win. And whichever candidate, regardless of gender, background, or race, has the ideological temperament to be able to handle the job on day one, is articulate, and can make a convincing case for the direction of the type of more populist policies that Donald Trump is advocating for, and can really handle themselves in the debate, is somebody who should be considered regardless of background. So while I think it's a background factor, I don't think it should be the most important consideration. It's obviously something that will be, I'm sure, in play for the team when they're vetting the candidates that they're looking at choosing. And
Orlando, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think we need to choose the best person possible, regardless of gender, race, or anything like that. I think really looking down the road in 4 years is extremely important. And I think that is the most critical issue that the vice president candidate will be looked at, is what are they going to be like in 4 years, and how well prepared will they be to lead our country? And I think if you look at all the people that have been mentioned, probably, at least in my mind, JD Vance fits the bill because of everything that's been talked about before. He's smart. He's been in the military. He's come from a difficult background. He's tested in a lot of ways. And I think people will see him as a leader. I think people perceive him to be a leader already, and a strong future leader. So Elise Stefanik is brilliant. I think she's great. But maybe, down the road, she'd be a future consideration.
And Karen, I want to leave you with the last word.
We have to win this election. So we have to learn the fact that we have got to win. We can't win it by, trying to pretend that all these other issues don't matter. You know, should it not matter? No, I'm not saying race and gender and all that other stuff should matter. But to pretend that it doesn't is being naive. This is an electorate right now where half the people can't even read cursive. And we're expecting them to understand who's going to be a good vice president. You have to, as they say, you have to sell Bob Smith what Bob Smith buys. And Bob Smith is going to look at things in a way that are maybe different than someone who is a political junkie is. We've got 270 electoral votes to get, and they're going to be in certain places where people can't tell you 5 people on the Supreme Court. So we have to understand that to develop the plan to win it. And part of that, not all, but part of it is going to be understanding what the demographics look like and how they appeal to all different factions of America.
Karen Watson, Orlando Salazar, Sanjay Narayan, and Jonathan Booz. Thank you all so much. It's been great listening to you, and we appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.